Hello there, this is ETV Special Edition and I'm Sintayo Tamrat with this edition. With this edition I'll try to focus on the Ethiopian agricultural transformation activities and my guest is today to talk on these and agricultural commercialization trends in Ethiopia, the challenges of the Ethiopian agricultural sector and engaging the private sector. I'm joined here at the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute by the Deputy Director General Dr. Yifru Tafese, and also Dr. Danyacho Lule, who is Senior Director of Agricultural Commercialization Cluster at the ATI. Thank you so much for staying with us and stay tuned. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Yifru and Dr. Danyacho.
Thank you very much.
Well, today, as I mentioned, we'll try to focus on the Ethiopian agriculture sector development and the challenges that hampered the development and also the ways out. So first let's start with food security. And though Ethiopia is known for its favorable agroecology, the country is yet unable to achieve food security. What are the major obstacles for this?
Thank you very much. I think before perhaps addressing the challenge, if you see the macroeconomy of the Ethiopian economy, agriculture has been always the driving force in the economic development of the country. Still, it's really the backbone of the economy, which employs over 70% of the labor force, generating over 80% of the foreign currency. So it's really an important economic sector. But if you see its growth in the past 15 years, 20 years, there has been really tremendous changes. For example, in terms of productivity, if you see by commodities, there are almost double growth since the past 20 years. So there has been really tremendous growth. But this growth has been primarily driven by intensive agricultural practices, mainly the provision of inputs. The adoption of fertilizer has been really massive in the past 15, 20 years. And the agricultural growth has been also the leading contributor to the GDP growth of the country. So in this process, the role of the other economic sectors such as industry and services has been also growing. Particularly the industry sector has been growing, mainly driven by the construction subsector. So if you see the agro-processing, the value addition subsector, its contribution has been like 5 to 6%. So we are on the right path towards transforming the agricultural sector, viewed from the point of view of the agricultural production and productivity. For example, the agricultural mahar production alone has exceeded over 400 million quintals. But if you see 20 years ago, it was almost half of this volume. So there are really significant changes in the agricultural sector. However, there are a number of challenges. We need to see the context in a broader sense, where you have to bring in the population growth, you have to bring in drought, you have to factor in urbanization. So you have to factor in the resource allocation to the sector. So if you see all these factors, these are all really systemic issues that somehow affect the growth of the agricultural sector. So population has been growing, for example, by 2.6%. So population that has been in 2007, that has been like 50-something million, now has almost more than double. So where are we heading? Is really our current production and productivity growth in agriculture can really feed ourselves? Absolutely yes, but it needs a significant change in our approach. Particularly the participation of the private sector in a large commercial farms. The land consolidation that we've been doing through clustering approach has to be intensified. in order to increase production and productivity. I believe the big commercial farms have to also play their significant role in producing and engaging a large commercial farms. Highly mechanized farms have to be in place in order to supplement the existing smallholder dominated agricultural production and productivity. So that way we can really complement and make sure our food security is ensured. Population growth is an opportunity. It means it's a huge market if we are able to manage it properly. The agro industries, the industry sector also is dependent on agriculture. They need significant amount of input from the agricultural side. For oilseeds literally depend on agriculture. So agro processors have to also invest backward towards production of their own raw materials besides engaging with smaller farmers through contract farming arrangements. So they need to also produce their own materials and at the same time work closely with our farmers to guarantee a continued supply of the raw materials to their factories. So yes, food insecurity is some parts of the country has been affected, particularly the marginal areas. But if you see the statistics, the food insecure population has significantly reduced. That has been like 39%, 35%, some 10, 15 years ago has come down now to 19%. So this is really a significant shift in terms of reducing the poverty line to the extent we are sure to feed ourselves.
Two takeaways from yours could be fragmented farming as well as disengagement of the private sector from large commercial farming are just key issues in the Ethiopian agriculture sector. And Dr. Danyache, would you add on these, just the challenges that have just hampered or just contributed to the food insecurity?
Thank you so much. As is already stated by Dr. Ifru, there is a gradual change from time to time. Honestly speaking, productivity is increasing from year to year. And the attitude of our farmers to use technologies, to use input, is also changing from time to time. In the contrary, the population size is also increasing. Similarly, there is a climate change, which is affecting our productivity in some areas, especially. Commonly, around lowland areas, we are just facing challenges of climate change. Still a potential, we have a natural resource, as you have already said. There is a high rainfall distribution. We do have a good weather condition to grow our crops. There is a possibility to grow productivity from currently to even double. If you take, for example, right now we are just getting a productivity of maize 42 quintal per hectare. If you see some model farmers are getting beyond 100, above 100 quintal per hectares. Leave alone making all the maize producer farmers model. If we make 60% of maize producer a model, if we increase our productivity from 42 to 60 or something like, it's really surplus to feed our nation, even extra to export. The same is true for wheat. Right now, the national average is 31 point something quintal per hectare. There is a possibility on research, there is a possibility on model farmers to increase this production be more than 60, 70 quintal per hectares. If we invest on agriculture, still there is a rewarding future to change the livelihood of our farmers. Yeah. Right now, the attention of the government is very good. We can say from other years, the attention given to the sector is very good. That will continue. Secondly, we have to engage again private sectors. Everything cannot be just managed by the government. For example, if we commit and invest to get our input, especially fertilizer, nationally in country to produce this fertilizer in country, you cannot imagine we can just reduce a lot of investment which we are investing to purchase fertilizers every year. We have the resource. There is a natural resource. So Ethiopia is known to invest, for example, granular resources. You can imagine, we invested a lot. If we sacrifice the same to produce our input, especially fertilizer, there is a radical change. Right now, the national average, farmers are using fertilizer, is 36 kilogram per hectare, which is much below other countries. But our soil is degraded. It's demanding more input. It's demanding more phosphorus and nitrogen. If we increase the application rate of this fertilizer, based on the study that was conducted by ETI already conducted, which soil have which nutrients? Every 748 districts were analyzed for the nutrient content it has. If we follow that one and apply crop nutrient demanded by the crop, we can increase production productivity. If our farmers are fully using improved technologies, improved varieties, mechanizations, management aspects, there is a possibility to double production productivity. It's not something that only mechanizing. Even oxen plow, there is an option to increase production productivity right now. But to attract youngsters, as I've said earlier, we have to mechanize, we have to digitalize, we have to make agriculture a business which can attract youngsters to invest on it, to work on it, and the like.
Okay. Maybe just on availability to the farmers, primarily fertilizer. We've been importing almost 15 million, 12 million per annum quintals of fertilizers, which is maybe close to $1 billion. So this, if you unlock this and reallocate this money to other investment areas to catalyze or transform the agriculture sector, that is a huge investment. And attempts are made to attract private sector to invest in fertilizer. We have done studies, we've approached a number of investors, international investors, to invest in fertilizer, especially in trade area. OCP is one of the examples that we approached. And other potential investors from Turkey are also interested to invest in fertilizer. Really, this is one of the critical bottlenecks that really affected the productivity of agriculture. Second thing is, we've been producing once in a year. Irrigation has never been a practice. Irrigation has been limited only to horticultural products. So you have seen in the past 2-3 years to what extent irrigation has contributed significantly to increase wheat production. So irrigation, producing it twice a year, 3 times a year, also is a huge opportunity for Ethiopia to move forward.
You are just telling me that there are progress, but many scholars still argue that the Ethiopian agriculture sector has not been modernized maybe for over a century, may I say?
Thank you very much. I think there are 2 approaches to growth. The one is intensification. To intensify input utilization with the existing land we are cultivating. As Dr. Danyi was saying, our current fertilizer per hectare utilization is 36 kg per hectare. If you take to Egypt, it's over 100 per hectare. So intensive use of inputs, both fertilizers, improved seeds is quite important. Availability of improved seed to our farmers is perhaps less than 30%. So only maize perhaps is the most widely available improved seed. So that has to be intensified. So through intensification, you can have growth. But at the same time, you can have expansion. Why we don't expand to other regions? Primarily, we've been focusing on highlands and traditional agrarian areas, but we have never touched into the lowlands. We've never touched into the western part of, for example, North Gondar. If you see, there's plenty of land that are suitable for big farms, irrigated farm, rain-fed agriculture. So expanding the existing land of cultivation is quite important. So we both ways, if we really focus and do both intensification and expansion, we can definitely not only feed ourselves, we can feed the rest of the, our brothers and sisters in the continent. We have ample opportunities. Now, rivers, we have 7 cross-boundary rivers. They have been flowing for centuries, but little has been used to irrigate them. These are opportunities if we work on them. So far, why we did not utilize those rivers, there's a number of factors. Capital is perhaps the most important factor. You need to have resources to build dams. You need to have the technologies also to bring in. You need to have, that's where also we need also private sector to come in, to construct dam, to engage in big commercial farms, so that the government cannot do everything for that. So I would say it's mostly the resource issue that perhaps affected us not to really utilize all those rivers. We have recently seen the Great Renaissance Dam. To what extent we've been affected by the international community, not even to use our own resources. So resource is the key factor, I would say, that has really affected the underutilization of those rivers.
So agriculture, as you mentioned, is still the foundation of Ethiopian economy. And in this regard, what has just to be done to maximize production and productivity? And what should be, what is the role of the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute? Let me start from... Yes.
Thank you so much. We have seen the potential. You have mentioned earlier, especially some scholars are still criticizing agriculture sectors. Yes, it is true. We are there still, but there is a change. We have to appreciate. Change will not come overnight. Sure. Gradually, there is a progress. Right now, the government attention, especially on irrigated wheat and others, it's good. As mentioned by Dr. Ifru, especially on irrigation, we have the resources. Those water resources should be utilized. They are capital intensive by nature. We have seen to just construct a single dam how much we just invested. We do have a number of waters, perennial waters flowing out of the country. Gradually, if we just invest on those one, there is a time when we can feed our nation and even produce surplus to export. That's the direction we are just seeing right now from the attention that government gave to the agriculture sectors. Similarly, we have to engage private sectors, especially on investing in this agriculture, especially inputs. We have said a lot about inputs, about mechanization, about fertilizers, about agrochemicals. Those are the inputs that can enhance production productivity, about seeds. As you know, majority of our seed enterprises are government. Majority, almost 90% of them are just producing the major commodities like wheat and the maize. The other commodities are more neglected. We have to engage private sectors to produce those kinds of seeds so that we can just provide input, full package to our farmers. If farmers use full package, if we shift their attitude from subsistent to commercial to produce surplus, there is a time, very short time to change the livelihood of farmers and also the nation itself. When I just come to your point, ATI is working on this one, nothing else. We are talking always, our focus is along the value chain. We are working on the input from supporting EGS, early generation seed, which is really a bottleneck to get surplus seeds every year. We are investing on that one, supporting research institutes to produce early generation seeds. We have a project on that one. And then there is a project working on especially private sectors and cooperatives, where we established close to 14 unions who can produce improved seeds every year. And right now they are supplying from 15 to 17% of the seed in the country supplied by those unions, which was established by ATI. We invested a lot on that one, from warehouse, from seed cleaning, grading, from machineries, vehicles, office, everything. So this kind of investment is to encourage our farmers, to encourage private sectors, to encourage unions, to invest on agriculture, and then bring some changes. And similarly, we are supporting private sectors. For example, we can just call agricultural one-stop shops. Right now, we have more than 200 agricultural one-stop shops. 186 of them are successfully implementing what we have planned. They are providing inputs, AI service, agrochemicals, seeds, and fertilizers to the farmers with no bureaucracy. Now, those private sectors are grown to share companies. They are planning to introduce fertilizer by their own self, just import-export system. They are engaging themselves in import-export systems. This is what ATI is doing. Plus, especially on mechanization sectors, we have said once, again, I can say, there is the only mechanism we can attract youngsters if we mechanize our agriculture. Our youngsters are not really, may not to be attracted with these laborious agricultural activities, which our forefathers are working, have been working. So we have to modernize that one. We have to mechanize that one. That's why we are clustering our farmers. If we cluster them, if we bring them, there is a possibility to use tractors. There is a possibility to use inputs. There is a possibility to use mechanization, post-harvest mechanizations, combiner harvester, everything. There is a possibility to link them with markets. If they produce together, if they have some surplus products in the future, the surplus product will be accumulated to transform those subsistence farmers to commercials. They will be engaged in agro-processing, value addition, export system, or something like that. That's what ATA is doing. We have also another innovative project, especially digital agricultures. We have said about IVS, which is really our farmers are just without touching money, they are getting inputs and credits. And our farmers are calling or getting a message, an alert message for climate change, an alert message for disease outbreak, or call free of charge to get an information about crop management, crop protection, or something. That's digital agriculture. Right now we have 6.1 million farmers using that one, which we call 8028 Farmers Hotline. So as already mentioned earlier, 7.75 million farmers are using input vouchers. They are just getting inputs through credit or through this input voucher system. This is what ATA is doing. This should be scaled up. The aim of the workshop that we are just conducting today is also enhancing those technologies or expanding those technologies to others, and also get a comment from the participants if there is any input that we can improve for the futures. Thank you.
Smaller farmers and the private sector to operate. There are a number of reforms being carried out, in the sector. There are 10 thematic areas that the Ministry of Agriculture has embarked on. Besides, revising the rural and agricultural the rural and agricultural policy, there are other 10 thematic areas where reforms are being taken. One is land, for example. The land system has to be revised, including the acid soil, the land policy itself. Existing policy, there is no clear policy on land management system. For example, is a wheat farm for, farmers are replacing the wheat farm by eucalyptus trees. And urbanization is expanding into farmlands. And any investor is taking over farmlands for building factories. So we are working on having the right policy in place to make sure, what role does which land has on the ground. So land reform is one aspect. Second is private sector participation. So as a policy that has been clearly articulated, we need a private sector on board to contribute towards the transformation of the agricultural sectors, be it in inputs, be it in production, be it in markets or in value additions. The private sector has to have really a robust support from the government. So that's another reform area. The third is agricultural finance. We know the agricultural sector generates over 80% of the foreign currency, but if you look into the investment in agriculture, still way beyond what the sector demands. So we need a dedicated agricultural financial services that can really support the agricultural sector. Output market, another reform area. Input marketing, another digital technologies. So we are looking all those policy environments to enable, all actors are really contributing their share properly. Acid soil within the land reform thematic area, acid soil is one of the subcomponents, because we said over 7 million hectares have been affected by acidity. Of the total 16 million hectares that are currently being farmed. So you can imagine 40% of the land is almost less productive. Therefore, really addressing that itself brings a significant contribution toward this production increase.
So policy framework is just one issue that you have mentioned as an opportunity. So what opportunities are there, other opportunities I mean, are there for developing or just boosting up the Ethiopian agriculture sector? For example, do we really have labor force? Do we really have that land, enough agriable land? And other issues. Even also just the interest, the appetite of the private sector to come to Ethiopia, and also those Ethiopians locally to invest in the agriculture sector.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely important question to raise, because the private sector or any local or foreign investors needs an enabling environment to invest. It needs security, it needs stability. That's the duty of the government, to make sure we have really an environment for this sectors to operate. We have plenty of opportunities. We have really productive labor force, trained, productive. You can easily tap into that. Very cheap labor force. We have virgin lands. Literally, you can cultivate those lands without fertilizer. Go to the western part of the country. Go to the eastern part of the country. Go to the northeastern part of the country. These are almost virgin lands with little exposure to agricultural practices. We have been concentrating on the traditional highlands to feed our communities, our people. We did not look into the other areas where we have really plenty of opportunities. Making sure...
So this mindset of the policy makers should change?
Absolutely. Particularly to attract the private sector and interested investors in those areas. So as part of this initiative, we have, for example, studied the agricultural investment design in Somalia region. We have submitted our studies, and very next budget year, we are planning to work closely with Somali regional governments. In Afar, the study is going on. We've been traditionally concentrating on the 4 regions, Tigray, Amhara, SNNP, and Oromia. So we are expanding to support our regional partners to drive agricultural transformation. So the opportunities are plenty.
My next point is to Dr. Danyacho, and it is on agricultural commercialization. So agricultural commercialization is considered impactful in reducing income poverty for the rural community in particular. And how do you explain the agricultural commercialization trend in Ethiopia?
This commercialization cluster approach is introduced, especially by ATI, very recently. Unlike other projects I have seen so far, I was working for agriculture for the last 20-something years. This project has got very good buy-in by the government. So the number of farmers engaged in this cluster farming is also increasing from time to time. Officially, it was launched in 2019, but right now, with 2 to 3 years, with a report of ATI, with the intervention of ATI alone. I'm not just telling you what the government, what Ministry of Agriculture is also working. More than 2.23 million farmers are just working in cluster approach. So when we cluster those farmers, as you know, the land holding size of our farmer is very minimum. It is less than 0.8 hectare per household. having these kinds of fragmented land, the option we have is bringing them together to provide them an input, to advise them, to teach them, to mechanize their farm, and to link them to the markets. Otherwise, there is no way individually we can approach to change the level of single farmers. That's why we are just bringing these clusters. If we do so, as I've mentioned earlier, the sector will be unattractive. Right now, 2 days back, contract farming is already approved by the parliament. Private sectors will be just attracted to sign contract farming with farmers so that they can provide an input. They can provide them every technologies and they can just buy their product finally. The experience of multiple is that one. The two French companies are working in that way. They are just providing an input seed and the fertilizers to farmers through contract agreement. They are also just buying the product of farmers at the end of the day with very good price. So this cluster approach is from end to end. It's a value chain approach from input, from farming to marketing and processing. So it is just increasing from year to year, and the number of farmers is increasing from year to year. Right now, the Ministry of Agriculture is expanding, primarily we were implementing these cluster farmers in 4 regions, in Tigray, Amara region, Oromia, and SNNP. But right now, SNNP is just splitting. We have in Sidama and Southwest also. But the Ministry of Agriculture is expanding this cluster farming to other regions. They took the manual. We have prepared together the manual and everything. Normally, we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture. We don't have structure down at Warada levels. We capacitate the Warada level development agent, experts, and everything. We introduce the approach, and the implementer is Ministry of Agriculture. ATI we will not have from up to bottom. We are just closely working with the Ministry of Agriculture, and that linkage was really highly appreciated. So the ministry is expanding this approach in Afar region, in Somalia region, in Gambela region, and then Benishangul region as of the coming year. So this cluster farming, agricultural commercialization cluster is increasing from time to time. It is not only producing, there is a value chain alliance. Every year, value chain alliance is just, which is led by, primarily it was led by the president of the region, but right now we are just cascading to commodity level. There is a value chain alliance for multi-barley, there is a value chain alliance for wheat, where all stakeholders working on wheat is engaged, from producer to marketing, processing, and everything. We are just interlinking them so that the producers can be attracted to produce more. So market should not be an issue. Just we are trying that way. So agricultural commercialization cluster is working from end to end.
So, Dr. Ifru, can you add here particularly the experience of other countries when compared with Ethiopia? How do you explain that, the agricultural commercialization cluster? Have you just come across the experience of other countries?
Yeah, before actually introducing the agricultural commercialization cluster to Ethiopia, we did an extensive study in 2016-17. The practices in East Asian countries, particularly Taiwan, Malaysia. So what was really the success stories, what was the challenges they had. So we did an extensive studies before piloting the agricultural commercial cluster. In some countries they call it the agricultural corridor. In some countries, you know, the name varies, but the approach is pretty much similar. So we need to adapt, take the best lessons from them, and look into our context. So we designed the agricultural commercialization cluster approach in 2018. We piloted in a limited waradas in 2018. In 2019, the European calendar, we launched it with the presence of Her Excellency President Sahle-Work. The 300, the agricultural commercial cluster in 300 waradas across the 4 regions, focusing on 10 commodities, 5 horticultural commodities, 5 grain commodities. Now we have added soybean because of the increasing demand for oil processors. We have added soybean. So our agricultural commercial cluster has been informed based on lessons drawn from those countries. So it's not really something we just brought in from the sky and do it. So we did an extensive study, piloted even before launching it to 300 Waradas. We did the pilot, and the pilot was quite successful. Then we launched it. It's a 5-year program. It will be finished this year, but we will extend it given its really success story so far.
Let's say that we have just reached the surplus level in producing, and how do you explain the infrastructure situation of the country? For example, export needs good roads or railway, and can farmers access these? And also the payment system by itself. So can you just mention or explain?
You know, increasing production productivity does not mean transforming the agricultural sector. As Dr. Daniel said, it has to be linked to the market. It has to be financed. A cold chain infrastructure has to be in place for horticultural commodities that are easily perishable. You need to have cold chains, cold storage, cold transportation system in place. You need to have aggregators who brings the products to the market. You need to have market shades. Now, that's where we need now the private sector to invest, for example, in cold chain, because it's an investment. It needs huge, amount of capital investment. We need partners, private sector, to work and invest in cold chain. Not only that, we need certification. If you want to market access, especially export market, European or Chinese market will not accept you whatever produced in the farmland. They need proper certification. International accredited certifying body has to certify for avocados for it to be sold in Europe or in China. That needs investment. So a certifying body has to come. There are their own formalities, requirements that the farmers have to do. How is the farming going on? How is the aggregation going on? How is the avocado harvested? How is it transported? How is it stored? How is it processed? Pack houses are important for the private sector to invest. So these are the kind of infrastructure we have to bring in to support farmers realize their income and growth. That's a very important question that we've been working to attract the private sector and invest in this. And we are also investing in market sheds. Of course, the transport services, we've been approaching local companies that have cold transportation facilities to at least supply to our cluster farmers. Obviously, road construction is important, railway access is important as we move on. It's a very critical question that we are working on.
Dr. Danyacho, can you have your say, please?
Especially on infrastructures, as already mentioned by Dr. Rifu, there are a lot to be done. There are a pilot, especially if you take, we don't have good storage for we are just producing wheat. The government is investing on irrigated wheat even. We don't have good storage, which can maintain our seed in a quality way so that we can export. Even we can just use it internally. We have to invest a lot on these kinds of infrastructure. It's not only the road, it's not only the telecommunication or something like. Even whenever we see the productivity it would have to be increased, we have to think the other side also. If we increase our production productivity, where are we just going to keep our output? So that we'll just maintain the productivity in a quality way so that we can utilize it safely, healthy foods, and also export for others. We know some of the commodities which is just failing after we export to other countries because of the storage, because of the mismanagement after post-harvest. Our investment on post-harvest is very weak, very weak. There is a studies conducted. ATI has been conducting what we have to do to just maintain our quality products after harvest, post-harvest management, handling, everything. These kinds of issues should get an attention whenever we just focus. We have to increase production productivity, so what? The next step should be these kinds of issues.
So one key role that to boost up production and productivity in the Ethiopian agriculture sector is to engage the private sector. Then engaging the private sector may not be necessarily from local investors, but also from abroad. For example, many investors from the Middle East and other countries are eyeing the Ethiopian agriculture sector. Do you think there are just much conducive environment for those agricultural investors?
I can tell you our experience. We have developed 10 investment cases in agriculture here for us to pitch potential investors to come in Ethiopia and invest. That's what Dr. Danyi was mentioning, the two big malting companies who have invested over $100 million in Ethiopia were convinced because of those investment cases that we submitted to them. But you know, it's not only pitching and submitting the investment case to them and then keep quiet. You have to continuously follow with them, make sure they are well supported across the investment, across their investment journey, right from licensing up to securing lands. You have to provide all the necessary support. I have been working closely with one of the malting, the Burtmalt, while I was, a director here, even to the extent of looking for land investment in the regions. So the providing support to the investment, to foreign investors particularly, because they don't know the investment, bureaucracies here. Sometimes, because of lack of, awareness, the investor may not be.
Meaning we have not just promoted it well.
2 weeks ago, I did a presentation to the Ethiopia Investment Summit 2023. And I had a number of potential investors who came to me to look for opportunities in fertilizer, in horticulture, in mechanization. I am still closely working with our embassies in those countries. One is in Saudi Arabia, another is in Turkey, another is in England, and the other guy is in India. So our embassies are really closely working with the Ethiopian Investment Commission, and then we are also liaising there to support those investors who are interested in the agricultural space. But it is frustrating if you do not support them, because their experience somewhere in UK is quite different from that of in Ethiopia. We lack that service orientation, providing hand-holding services to our investors. They are coming with foreign currencies to invest here. They are our clients. We need to provide the necessary support to make sure they really invest properly. So when they really face struggle, the government office have to intervene and, hey, please give the necessary support within the country's law. So that orientation needs a lot to do. We need really to train people so that they really become customer friendly. That's an area we need to work.
What message do you just convey for those global and local investors that want to invest in large commercial farming in Ethiopia?
If they are interested in horticulture investment, there are so many technologies, greenhouse and other technologies are there really to make sure they are not exposed to various pests and diseases. Second thing is, of course, with all that being said, security is very important. They need a security assurance from the government, and that has to be there in place to make sure their investment is well taken care of. Third is the investment climate is very nice. There are attractive investment packages, but we need to work closely with alignment between federal and regional government is quite important, because land is being allocated by the regional governments. The federal government does not have land. So the federal institutions have to closely work with regional governments to smoothen the lives of those investors. necessary, supports, investment packages are there for them to really, financing facilities are there for them to work. So if we really make sure those things are addressed, and I'm sure, as far as agriculture is concerned, we are really ready to support our investors to, provide hand-holding services on the ground. So we have regional offices, we have the federal institutions here, so we really are very much grateful to support potential investors.
Dr. Ifru Tafesa, Deputy Director General of the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute, and also Dr. Danyacho Lule, Senior Director for Agricultural Commercialization Cluster at the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute. I really appreciate for the explanation. This is a wonderful explanation you have just given us on the Ethiopian agricultural transformation, as well as the challenges and agricultural commercialization trends in Ethiopia. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dear viewers, this is the conversation with Dr. Danyacho Lule and Dr. Ifru Tafesa, who are both from the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute, and we talked on the Ethiopian agricultural transformation, the challenges and the ways out. I really appreciate for staying with us. Thank you so much. I'm Sintayo Tamrat with this special edition.